Chapter 31. When we got back to the suite, there were 2 packages waiting for us. The first contained footage of Sterling and Briggs's most recent interview with Tori Howard. The second was from Aaron Shaw. Sloane wordlessly opened the second package. Inside were 6 tickets to tonight's performance of Tori Howard's Imagine. The advertisement included with them promised a bewitching evening of mind-warping entertainment. On the bottom, Aaron had written, in a slanted, cursive scrawl, "On the house." He'd signed his name. "I have to go do something that isn't cry now," Sloane said, "and I'd like to do it alone." She bolted before any of us could say anything. Leah and I exchanged a look. When Michael and Dean joined us, we brought them up to speed. Leah flipped her hair over her shoulder and did her best impression of someone who wasn't concerned about Sloane, or anyone other than herself. "So," she said, picking up the footage the FBI had sent, "who wants to watch Sterling and Briggs cross-examine Aaron Shaw's girlfriend?" On screen, Agent Briggs, Agent Sterling, and Tori were in what appeared to be some kind of interrogation room, as was a man I assumed to be Tori's lawyer.
"Thank you for agreeing to meet with us again."
Briggs sat across from Tori. Sterling was to his left. Tori's lawyer sat beside her.
"My client was glad to come down and clear up any lack of clarity that may exist in her prior statements."
The lawyer's voice was smooth and baritone. Even from a distance, his watch looked expensive. Tori didn't hire him. I didn't second-guess the intuition. Tori was tough. She was a straight talker, and she was a survivor. At one point in time, she'd been in the foster system. She'd fought for everything she had. She would unquestionably hire the best lawyer she could afford to keep the FBI from strong-arming her. But her preference would lean towards someone more aggressive, with less of a fondness for designer suits.
"Miss Howard, when we last spoke to you, you indicated that Camille Holt was the one who chose the Majesty's restaurant as your destination that night."
"Did I?" Tori didn't bat an eye. "That's not right. I was the one who suggested we go there." I flashed back to seeing Tori in the alleyway with Aaron. Had they been discussing this interview? Had he told her what to say?
"Were you aware that the location of Camille's murder was set in advance?"
Agent Briggs asked. "No," Michael answered on her behalf. "She wasn't. Look at that." He gestured in the direction of the screen, though I couldn't tell what part of Tori's expression had tipped him off. "She's gut-punched." Agent Sterling took advantage of the moment. "What is your relationship with Aaron Shaw?" Tori was still absorbed enough in the revelation about Camille's murder that she might have actually answered, but her lawyer leaned forward. "My client will not be answering any questions about Aaron Shaw." "Check out the nostril flare on the lawyer on that one," Michael said. "Closest thing to emotion the guy's shown so far." In other words, he's more concerned with protecting Aaron than protecting Tori, I said. She didn't hire him. I thought again. The Shaws did. On screen, Sterling and Briggs exchanged a meaningful glance. Clearly, they'd picked up on that too.
"Understood,"
Agent Briggs told the lawyer.
"Moving along, Miss Howard, we were hoping you could lend us your expertise on hypnosis."
Tori glanced at the lawyer. No objections. "What do you want to know?"
"Can you describe the process through which you hypnotize someone?"
Briggs asked. He was keeping the questions general. Treat her like an expert, not a suspect, I thought. Smart. "I generally start with having volunteers count backward from 100. If I want a bigger impact, I might use a technique that gets a quicker result."
"Such as?"
"It's possible to shock someone into a hypnotic state," Tori said. "Or you can start some kind of automatic sequence, like a handshake, and then interrupt it."
"And once someone is under,"
Briggs said,
"you can implant certain suggestions, cause them to act in certain ways?
Tori was many things, but naive wasn't one of them.
If you have something specific in mind, Agent Briggs, she said, just ask.
Sterling leaned forward.
Could you hypnotize someone into getting a tattoo? That would depend, Tori replied evenly, on whether or not the person you were hypnotizing was open to getting a tattoo in the first place.
I thought she might leave it there, but she didn't.
Hypnosis isn't mind control, Agent Sterling. It's suggestion. You can't alter someone's personality. You can't make them do something they truly do not want to do. The hypnotized person isn't a blank slate. They're merely open. But if someone were open to getting a tattoo, then yes, Tori said, I might be able to implant that suggestion. But seeing as how I value my job and not getting sued by angry audience members, I try to stick to things that are a little less permanent.
Alexandra Ruiz's tattoo was made of henna, I thought. Less common than a regular tattoo, and less permanent.
Can anyone be hypnotized?
The questioning bounced back to Agent Briggs.
You can't force someone under who doesn't want to go.
Tori leaned back in her seat.
And some people are more easily hypnotizable than others. Daydreamers, people who had imaginary friends as children.
Beside Tori, the lawyer looked at his watch.
How quickly could someone learn to do what you do?
Briggs asked Tori.
To do it as well as I do it?
Tori asked.
Years. To be able to hypnotize someone, period. I know people who claim they can teach it in under 10 minutes.
I saw the next question coming.
Have you taught anyone?
Tori's eyes darted toward the lawyer.
I believe,
he said, standing up and gesturing for Tori to do the same,
that my client has indulged your interest long enough.
Aaron, I thought. She taught Aaron. The footage cut to static. After a moment's silence, Leah spoke up.
Every single word out of her mouth was true.
The real question, I thought, is what she wasn't saying.
I want to go.
I looked up to see Sloane standing in the doorway.
Go where?
Michael asked her.
To Tori Howard's Imagine,
Sloane said.
Aaron sent us complimentary tickets. I want to go.
I thought back to the way he'd rescued Sloane from the head of security. The way he'd ignored the shoplifting. The way he'd sworn that if he had known about her, things would have been different. I thought of Sloane's father telling her to stay away from his son. A knock sounded at the door.
Delivery,
someone called.
For Miss Tavish.
Dean was the one who opened the door. He accepted the box, his expression guarded. I wondered if he was thinking of the gifts I'd been sent once upon a time. Boxes with human hair in them, boxes that marked me as the object of a killer's fascination. We waited for Judd to open the box. There, against a backdrop of sedately striped tissue paper, was the shirt Sloane had tried to steal. There was a card inside. I recognized the handwriting as Aaron's. The message said simply, I'm not like my father. Sloane stroked her hand lightly over the silk shirt, an expression halfway between heartbreak and awe settling over her features.
I don't care what anyone says,
she said softly.
Not Briggs, not Sterling, not Grayson Shaw.
She gingerly lifted the shirt out of the box.
I'm going.
Chapter 32. All 6 of us went. Judd seemed to believe that was the lesser of 2 evils, the greater of those evils being the possibility that Sloane might find a way to go alone. As we found our seats, I scanned the auditorium. My gaze landed on Aaron Shaw a moment before he registered Sloane's presence. In an instant, his entire demeanor changed, from perfectly polished, every inch his father's heir apparent, to the person I'd caught a glimpse of back in the security office. The person who cares about Sloane. He made his way through the crowd toward us. "You came," he said, zeroing in on Sloane. He smiled, then hesitated. "I'm sorry," he said, "about earlier." For a moment, in that hesitation, he looked like Sloane. Beside me, our numbers expert cleared her throat. "A substantial portion of apologies are issued by people who have nothing to apologize for." That was Sloane's way of telling him that it was okay, that she didn't blame him for giving in to their father, for leaving her with him. Before Aaron could reply, a girl about his age appeared beside him. She wore dark jeans and a fashionably loose shirt. Everything about her, accessories, haircut, posture, clothes, said money. Old money, I thought. Understated. After a moment's hesitation, Aaron greeted her with a kiss to the cheek. A friend? I wondered. Or more than that? And if so, then what is Tori? "Ladies and gentlemen," a deep voice came over the auditorium speakers. "Welcome to Tori Howard's Imagine. As you prepare to be swept into a world where the impossible becomes possible, and you find yourself questioning the very depths of the human mind and experience, we ask that you set your cell phones to silent. Flash photography is strictly forbidden during the show. Break the rules, and we may be forced to make you disappear." The moment he said the word disappear, a spotlight highlighted the center of the stage. A light fog rose off the ground. 1 second, the spotlight was empty, and the next, Tori was standing there, clothed in tight black pants and a floor-length leather duster. She whipped her arm out to one side, and suddenly, without warning, she was holding a flaming torch. The spotlight dimmed. She brought the flame to the bottom of her jacket. My mind went to the second victim. Within a heartbeat, Tori was wearing a coat of fire. With a stage presence far more magnetic than I would have ever imagined, she lifted the torch to her lips, blew out the flame, and disappeared. "Good evening," she called from the back of the room. The audience turned to gape at her. The coat was burning blue now. "And welcome to Imagine." She threw her arms out to the side, and suddenly the back 2 rows were on fire too. I heard someone scream, then laugh. Tori smiled a slow, sexy smile. The flames surged, then disappeared. She stepped through the smoke. "Let's get started," she said. "Shall we?" When most people watch a magic show, they try to figure out how the magician does it. I wasn't interested in the magic. I was interested in the magician. She wasn't Tori. Not the Tori I'd seen before. The persona she'd slipped into the moment she'd walked onto the stage had a mind and a will and a personality of its own. "And now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm looking for volunteers. Specifically..." Stage Tori raked her eyes over the audience, as if she could make out each of our faces and read each of our thoughts. "I'm looking for individuals who would like to participate in the portion of tonight's show devoted to hypnotism." Hands shot up all over the crowd. Tori went through, calling people up. A handful of women, an 85-year-old man who punched a fist into the air when he climbed up on stage. "And," she said, drawing out the word once she had about a dozen volunteers pulled out. "You." For a second, I thought she was pointing at me. Then I realized she was pointing in front of me, at the girl sitting next to Aaron. Sloane's brother went ramrod stiff. The girl next to him stood up. A couple of seats down from me, so did Michael. When Tori realized Michael was acting like she'd called on him, she rolled with the punches. "Looks like I got 2 for the price of 1. Both of you, come on up." "Michael," I said, reaching for him as he brushed past me. "Come on, Colorado," he told me. "Live a little." Up on stage, Michael gave a courtly bow to the audience and took his seat. Tori faced her volunteers and spoke to them for a moment. None of us could hear what she said. After 2 or 3 seconds, she turned back to the crowd, and the volume came back up on her microphone.
"I'm going to count backward from 100, she said,
pacing the row in front of her volunteers.
100, 99, 98. I want you to picture yourself lying on a raft next to an island. 97, 96, 95. You're drifting. 94, 93. The further I count, the farther you go. 92, 91.
As she counted, Tori went by each of the volunteers. She took their heads in her hands and rolled them back and forth. The further I count, the farther you go. She kept saying those words.
Your body is heavy. Your head, your neck, your legs, your arms.
Up and down the row she went. She tapped a couple of participants on the shoulder and sent them back to their seats, then began to describe a light, floating sensation.
Your body is heavy, but your right arm is weightless. It floats up, up, 7, 6. The further I count, the farther you go. 5, 4, 3, 2.
By the time she hit 1, the 9 volunteers remaining on the stage were slumped in their chairs, their right arms creeping upward. I turned toward Leah. Is Michael faking it? I raised an eyebrow at Leah, hoping to get an answer, but her concentration was fixed on the stage.
You're on the beach,
Tori told her hypnotized subjects.
You're sunbathing. Feel the sun on your skin. Feel the warmth.
Their faces instantly relaxed, smiles crossing their lips.
Don't forget to put on sunscreen.
Tori's voice was light and silky now. I couldn't help snorting as Michael began rhythmically rubbing pretend sunscreen all over his biceps. He flexed for the crowd.
Now,
Tori said, walking up and down the length of the stage.
Whenever you hear me say the word mango, you will come to believe that you have just passed gas, loudly, in a crowded room.
It was 5 minutes before Tori said the word mango. Immediately, all of the hypnotized subjects started looking distinctly uncomfortable, except for Michael, who gave an elaborate shrug, and the girl who'd been sitting with Aaron, who took a step forward, and then another, and another. She walked straight to the edge of the stage, her head bowed. Just when I thought she might walk off the front, she came to a sudden halt.
Miss, I'm going to need you to take a step back,
Tori called. The girl lifted her head. Her light brown hair fell away from her face. She stared at the audience, her gaze piercing.
Tersham,
she said. One of the stage lights shattered and popped.
Tersham,
the girl repeated, her voice louder, more piercing. Tori was trying to get her to back up, trying to wake her up, but she couldn't.
Tersham!
The girl was screaming now. Behind her, the rest of the hypnotized subjects stood perfectly still. Michael broke away from the others, his eyes cogent and clear. The girl raised her hands to the side, palms out. Her voice lowered itself to a coarse but powerful whisper that hit me like spiders crawling down my spine. I need 9. Chapter 33. The girl's eyes rolled back in her head. She collapsed. Tori leapt forward. In the row in front of us, Aaron pushed his way to the aisle. The curtain came down. An uneasy murmur spread through the audience. The people around us had no idea what had just happened. They had no idea what it meant. You need 9. The thought came to me in pieces. I forced air into my lungs.
9.
Sloane's voice somehow managed to reach my ears through the dull roar of the crowd. Tertium. 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 3. 3 times 3. Please remain in your seats, a deep voice commanded over the loudspeaker. The show will resume momentarily. Judd took one look at the potential for chaos and jerked his head toward the nearest exit. What about Townsend? Dean said as we pushed our way through the crowd. He's still on stage. Judd deposited us safely in the hallway. I'll go get Michael, he told Dean. You stay here and watch the girls. That got a substantial eyebrow raise out of Leah. I do hope my dowry is large enough to attract a virile man, she told me wistfully. I'm so very helpless on my own. Dean was wise enough not to reply. Once Judd was out of earshot, Leah lowered her voice. So, are we all thinking that either Aaron's little girlfriend is our killer and she just had a psychotic break, or that our killer somehow hypnotized her into delivering that message? I nodded. After a second or two, Dean agreed. Yes. Tertium again, Leah commented. You think our guy considers that his name? Tertium, I thought, meaning the third time. The third time. The third time. The third time. I need 9. It's not a name, I told Leah. It's a promise. I turned to look at Sloane, to get her read on the numbers, but she wasn't beside me. I whirled, doing a 360. No Sloane. Leah cursed, then slammed back into the theater. An instant later, Dean and I were on her heels. Sloane was usually easy to spot, but in a crowd this large, the best I could do was follow Leah and think, Sloane came here to see Aaron, and the last time I saw her, she was talking about the numbers. That meant that she was either trailing after Aaron, or she'd gone straight to the source of the numbers. The girl. Either way, she was probably...
Backstage!
I yelled to Leah, struggling to keep up with her as she pushed her way to the front of the auditorium. 2 bouncer types were positioned on either side of the stage. Leah leaned forward and whispered something in one of their ears. The man paled and stepped aside, allowing us to pass. I truly did not want to know what Leah had told him, but I had to admit that her particular skill set definitely had its uses. Backstage, I spotted Michael crouched near the girl, who was sitting up now. Judd stood behind Michael. Sloane wasn't with them. That left one likely option. Find Aaron, I said, and we'll find Sloane. You son of a bitch! I turned just in time to see Bo Donovan slam Aaron Shaw up against a wall. Aaron had 3 or 4 inches and a good 30 pounds on Bo, but Bo came at him like he was completely unaware of that fact. I found Aaron, Leah said. Aaron threw Bo off him. Bo skidded backward on his heels, then came at Aaron again. This time, a small blonde blur stepped in front of Aaron. Sloane. Dean lunged forward. He hated violence. He avoided it at all costs because he could never be sure that he wouldn't wake up one day and like it too much. But if anyone laid so much as a finger on Sloane... Aaron stepped in front of Sloane a second before Bo collided with her. Dean latched a protective arm around Sloane's waist and pulled her back. Bo shoved Aaron again, and Aaron snapped and surged forward. They both went down. Within seconds, Aaron was on top and unquestionably in control. Bo's gaze locked onto Aaron's face with intense hatred. What is your problem? Sloane's brother spat. In answer, Bo resumed his struggle for the upper hand. Aaron held him in place, the way a wolf might pin a pup.
My problem? Bo said. My problem is you. You bring your little high-class, never worked a day in her life girlfriend here to my sister's show?
Bo didn't give Aaron time to respond.
You think that you can treat people like they're nothing.
Bo surged again, and this time he ended up on top just long enough to land a solid punch to Aaron's jaw before security swarmed them. The guards pulled Bo off of Aaron, a little harder than necessary, and then looked to Aaron for instruction. Allison is not my girlfriend, Aaron said calmly. She's just a family friend, and I was as surprised to see her here as you were.
I doubt that.
Aaron and Bo turned in unison to look at Tori. She was still dressed in her costume from the show, but she was fully herself again. No muss, no fuss. Nothing can hurt you unless you let it. You're the one who called her up on stage, Aaron told Tori. What the hell were you thinking, Tori? He paused. What did you do to her?
She didn't do anything.
Bo struggled beneath the security guard's hold.
You probably set the whole thing up, you sick son of a... Enough!
Tori shouted. Bo stilled. Tori dragged her gaze from him to Aaron, and her eyes hardened.
I want you both out of here. Now.
The now seemed to be directed at the security guards.
Sir,
one of them told Aaron, visibly uncomfortable with the words exiting his mouth.
I'm going to have to ask you to leave.
Aaron's eyes never left Tori's face. Tori, let me explain.
You don't need to explain.
Tori's voice was emotionless, but there was steel underneath.
Our relationship is strictly professional.
She looked around at the audience they'd gathered, including Sloan, Leah, Dean, and me, and her voice hardened.
It always has been.
You heard her, Bo told Aaron, his eyes hard.
Don't.
Tori rounded on Bo, her voice cracking whip-loud through the air.
I didn't ask you to do this, Bo, and I'm done cleaning up your messes.
She swallowed, and I got the sense that sending Bo away was even harder for her than ending things with Aaron.
Leave,
she said, her voice lower. Now. Without waiting for a response, Tori turned back to the stage and started yelling out directions for the stagehands.
Get a doctor up here for Miss Lawrence, then call the head of security and inform him we have a situation. I want this show back up and running in 5 minutes.
I'm afraid that won't be possible. Agent Briggs knew how to make an entrance. In this case, with his badge held high for everyone to see. Special Agent Briggs, FBI, he said, his voice carrying. I'm going to need to ask you all some questions. You. Could you be any clearer? The numbers, the spiral, the dates. It's an act of contrition, an act of devotion, an act of revenge. You've waited so long. You've waited, and you've planned. And now that you're this close, you can feel it. The old anger creeping back into your veins. The power. The fear. You will finish it. 3 times 3 times 3. You will be worthy. This time, you will not fail. Chapter 34. The dream started the way it always did. I was walking through a narrow hallway. The floor was tiled. The walls were white. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead. On the ground, my shadow flickered too. At the end of the hallway, there was a metal door. I walked toward it. Don't, Don't open the door. Don't go in there. The warning came from my conscious mind, which knew all too well what lay down that road. But I couldn't stop. I opened the door. I stepped into the darkness. I reached for the light switch on the wall. I felt something warm and sticky on my hands. Blood. I flipped the switch. Everything went white. All I could do was blink until the scene settled in front of me. A spotlight. A crowd. I was on stage wearing the royal blue dress I'd tried on in the store. My gaze traveled over the audience, picking out the ones I'd marked in advance for readings. The woman in the white vest, clutching her purse like it might sprout legs and run away. The teenager whose eyes were already tearing up. The older gentleman in the pale blue suit, sitting dead center in the front row. This isn't right, I thought frantically. I don't want to do this. I turned, and in the wings, I saw myself. Younger. Watching. Waiting. I woke with a start. My hands were wound tightly in the sheets. My chest heaved up and down. I was alone in the room. No Sloane. Processing that, I rolled over to look at the clock and froze. The walls were completely covered. Sheet after sheet of paper, marked in red. This must have taken Sloane all night, I thought. She hadn't said a word when we'd gotten back to the room. Not about the message from our killer, not about Aaron and the accusations Beau had flung at him. Rolling out of bed, I went to examine Sloane's work more closely. 12 sheets of printer paper had been affixed to the wall in 4 rows of 3. January, February, March. I was looking at a handwritten calendar. Dates had been circled at seemingly random intervals. 6 in January, 3 in February, 4 in March. I scanned the next row. A handful in April, only 2 in May. Nothing in June or July, I murmured out loud. My hand lifted. I pressed my fingers to the day that would always jump out at me in any calendar. June 21st. That was the day my mother had disappeared. Like the rest of the days in June, it was unmarked on Sloane's calendar. I scanned the remainder of the months, then moved on to the rest of the walls in our room. More calendars, more dates. Taking a step back, I took in the full scope of what Sloane had done. There were years' worth of calendars on these walls, with the same dates marked on every one. Sloane? I called toward the bathroom. The door was closed, but a moment later, I got a reply. I'm not naked. In Sloane speak, that was as good as an invitation to come in. Did you sleep at all last night? I asked as I opened the door. Negative, Sloane replied. She was wrapped in a towel and staring at the mirror. Her hair was wet. On the mirror's surface, she'd drawn a Fibonacci spiral. It covered her face in the reflection. Sloane stared at herself through the spiral. My mother was a dancer, she said suddenly. A showgirl. She was very beautiful. That was the first time I'd ever heard Sloane mention her mother. I knew then that she'd been awake all night for a reason beyond the papers on the walls. My biological father likes beautiful things. Sloane turned to look at me. Tori is aesthetically appealing, don't you think? And the other girl with Aaron was very symmetrical. You're wondering if Aaron takes after your father. You're wondering if Tori is his secret, the way your mother was his father's. Sloane, I started to say, but she cut me off. It doesn't matter, Sloane said, in the tone of someone to whom it mattered very much. January 12th, she said fiercely. That's what matters. Today is the 9th. We have 3 days. 3 days? I repeated. Sloane nodded. Until he kills again. Tertium, tertium, tertium. Sloane stood in the middle of our suite, gesturing to the paper-covered walls. 3 times 3 is 9. I need 9.
And 3 times 3 times 3, Sloane continued, is 27.
Tertium, tertium, tertium. 3 times 3 times 3.
Remember what I said yesterday about the dates and how I think they're derived from the Fibonacci sequence?
Sloane said.
I spent all night going through the different possible methods of derivation, but this one,
she pointed to the first wall I'd investigated,
is the only version where, if you end the sequence 27 dates in, you also end up with exactly 3 repetitions within the sequence.
3. 3 times 3 times 3.
It was just a theory, Sloane said. But then I hacked the FBI's server.
You what?
I did a search over the past 15 years,
Sloane clarified helpfully,
for murders committed on January 1st.
You hacked the FBI? I said incredulously.
And Interpol,
Sloane replied brightly. And you'll never guess what I found. Security holes that the world's most elite crime-solving agencies seriously need to patch?
11 years ago, there was a serial killer in upstate New York.
Sloane walked over to the next wall, years' worth of calendars papering it from ceiling to floor. She knelt and pressed her fingers to one of the calendar pages.
The first victim, a prostitute, turned up dead on August 1st of that year.
She moved her hand down the page.
Second victim on August 9th. Third victim on August 13th.
She moved on to the next page.
September 1st, September 14th.
She bypassed October.
November 2nd, November 23rd.
She slowed as she brought her hand to rest on the date marked in December.
December 3rd.
She looked up at me, and I did the mental count. 8, I thought. That's 8. I looked for the next date. January 1st.
It's the same pattern, Sloane said, just with a different start date.
She turned to the last wall. There was a single piece of paper on it, the first 13 numbers of the Fibonacci sequence. 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, 34, 55, 89, 144, 233.
1-1,
Sloane said.
January 1st. In the first iteration I tried, the second date generated was 1-2, but that method limits you to dates in the first third of the month. Hardly efficient. Instead,
she drew a square around the second 1 and the 2 that followed it.
Voila! 1-12. Split in a different spot, that's 11-2. So we add both of those dates to the list. Tack on the next digit in the sequence, and you've got 11-23. Once we've made all the dates we possibly can, including the first integer in the sequence, we move on to the second. That gives us 1-2 and 1-23. And if you split 1-23 after the 2 instead of the 1, that gives us 12-3. Then on to the third integer, 2-3. February only has 28 days, so 235 is just filler. We go on to 3-5, then 5-8, 8-1, 8-13, 1-3, 3-2, 3-21, 2-1, 2-13, 1-3. You see how January 3rd just repeated?
My brain raced as I tried to keep up.
If you end the sequence after it's produced 27 dates, 3 times 3 times 3, you've generated exactly 3 repeated dates, January 3rd, February 3rd, and May 8th.
I tried to parse what Sloane was saying. If you generated a total of 27 dates based on the Fibonacci sequence, you ended up with a pattern that was consistent not only with our killer's pattern, but also with a series of 9 murders committed over a decade ago. I need 9.
The case from 11 years ago,
I said, commanding Sloane's attention.
Did they ever catch the killer?
Sloane tilted her head to the side.
I'm not sure. I was just looking at the dates. Give me a second.
Sloane's eidetic memory meant that she automatically memorized anything she read. After going back over the files in her head, she answered the question.
The case is still open. The killer was never caught.
Most serial killers don't just stop, I thought, Agent Sterling's words echoing in my mind. Not unless someone stops them. Sloan, I said, trying to keep my mind from racing too fast.
The killer who ended his run on January 1st. How did he kill his victims?
This time, it took Sloan a fraction of a second to pull the information to the front of her mind.
He slit their throats, she said,
with a knife. Chapter 35. I tried Sterling's cell, then Briggs's. Neither of them answered. They were probably up all night, I thought, talking to witnesses, trying to figure out who, if anyone, hypnotized Aaron's friend to deliver that message.
I'm going to talk to Dean, I told Sloan. Catch him up on what you just told me.
I took in the dark circles under Sloan's eyes. You should try getting some sleep. Sloan frowned.
Giraffes only sleep 4.5 hours a day.
Knowing a losing battle when I saw one, I let her be. Making my way quietly across the suite, I stopped outside Dean's room. The door was cracked open. I placed my hand flat on the wood.
Dean?
I called. When he didn't respond, I knocked lightly. The door drifted inward, and I caught sight of Dean sleeping. He'd pushed his bed to one side of the room and slept with his back to the wall. His blonde hair fell gently into his eyes. His face was free of tension. He looked peaceful. I began backing out of the doorway. The floor creaked, and Dean bolted up in bed. His eyes unseeing, his hand thrust out in front of him. His fingers were curved, like he'd caught a ghost by the neck.
It's me,
I said quickly. When he still didn't register my presence, I turned on the light.
It's me, Dean.
I stepped toward the bed. It's just me. Dean's head swiveled. He stared through me, and then a moment later, he was back. His eyes focused on mine. Cassie. He said my name the way another person might rattle off a prayer.
Sorry,
I told him, coming closer.
For waking you up.
Don't be sorry, Dean said, his voice rough. I crawled onto the bed beside him. His hands found their way to the ends of my hair, his touch soft. He closed his eyes for a moment, taking in the warmth of my body. When he opened them, they were calmer, clear. Something's wrong, Dean said, observant as always. I wondered if he could see the tension in my shoulders. I wondered if he could feel it with his feather-light touch. Sloan found something. I let his touch steady me, even as it steadied him. She derived a series of 27 dates from the Fibonacci sequence. Then she did a search on the FBI's database for serial murders, where one or more of the killings happened on New Year's Day. Briggs and Sterling gave her that kind of access? My facial expression must have answered that question for me. She hacked the FBI. Dean paused. Of course she did. She's Sloan. She found a decade-old case that fits the same pattern, I told him. 9 victims, killed on Fibonacci dates. M.O.? Dean asked. Killer used a knife. He attacked from behind and slit his victims' throats. The first victim was a prostitute. I don't have information on any of the others. 9 bodies, Dean repeated, on dates derived from the Fibonacci sequence. I shifted my body, leaning into his. Last night, the message was, I need 9. Need, Dean, not want, not I'm going to kill 9. Need. The number of victims mattered, the same way the numbers on the wrists did, the same way the dates did. The case Sloan found is still open, I told Dean. It was never closed. Sterling said that serial killers don't just stop killing. Dean heard the question I hadn't yet put into words. Could we be dealing with the same killer? 11 years is a long time for a killer to deny himself, Dean said. I saw the shift in Dean before his words confirmed it. Each time I kill, I need more. To go without for so long?
Is it even possible? I asked Dean. Can an unsub kill 9 people and then just wait?
Our unsub just killed 4 people in 4 days, Dean replied. And now he's waiting. Smaller scale, same concept. The numbers matter. The numbers told the unsub where to kill, when to kill, how long to wait. But making sure a portion of the sequence appeared on each victim's wrist? From the beginning, we'd read that as a message. What if the message was, I've done this before? Suddenly, my throat tightened. Tertium, I thought. Dean. My lips felt numb.
What if the word on the arrow didn't just refer to Eugene Lockhart being the unsub's 3rd victim this time around?
Tertium, tertium, tertium.
I could hear the girl saying the word. I could see her gaze staring out into the crowd.
The 3rd time. Dean slid to the end of the bed. He sat there for a moment in silence, and I knew he was putting himself in the killer's shoes, walking through the logic without ever saying it out loud. Finally, he stood. We need to call Briggs.
Chapter 36.
Dean made the call. Pick up, I thought. Pick up, Briggs. If this was the killer's 3rd time going through this pattern, 9 bodies killed on Fibonacci dates, we weren't dealing with a novice. We were dealing with an expert. The level of planning, the lack of evidence left behind. It fit. A second realization followed on the heels of the first. If our killer was slitting throats more than a decade ago, we're looking for someone no younger than their late 20s. And if the New York murders had been the second set and not the first. Briggs? Dean's voice was terse but calm. I turned toward him as he began bringing Briggs up to speed. We have reason to believe this might not be our unsub's first rodeo. Dean fell silent as Agent Briggs replied. I closed the space between Dean and me and put a hand on his arm. Tell him that Sloan broke the code, I said. The unsub is going to kill again, in the Grand Ballroom, on January 12th. Dean hung up the call without saying another word. What? I asked him. Why did you hang up? Dean's grip tightened over his phone. Dean? Briggs and Sterling got a call at 3 a.m. There was only one reason to call the FBI at 3 a.m. It's too soon, I thought. Sloan said the next murder would be on the 12th, the pattern. The Majesty's head of security was attacked, Dean continued. Blunt force trauma. I thought of the man who'd pulled us into the security office. The one who had come to get Sloane's father the night Camille was murdered. It fits the M.O., Dean continued. New method. Numbers on his wrist.
Weapon?
I asked. A brick. You bashed his head in with a brick. You took a brick and wrapped your fingers around it, and rage exploded inside of you, and you... Cassie. Dean cut my thought off. There's something else you should know. Did you get tired of waiting? I asked the unsub silently. Did something set you off? Did you get a rush out of watching this man go down? Did you savor the sound of his skull cracking? I couldn't stop. Each time, you feel more invincible, less fallible, less human. Cassie, Dean said again. The victim was still alive when they found him. He's in a medically induced coma now, but he's not dead. Dean's words snapped me out of it. You made a mistake, I thought. This was a killer who didn't make mistakes. Having left a victim alive would gnaw at him from the inside out. We need more information, I said. Pictures of the crime scene, defensive wounds on the victim, anything that might help us walk through it. They don't need us to walk through anything, Dean said. Explain how that sentence could possibly be true. I turned in the direction of the voice that had spoken those words and saw Leah. I wondered how long she'd been standing there, watching the interplay between Dean and me. They don't need us to profile it, because there was a witness. Dean looked from Leah to me. They've already apprehended the suspect. On screen, Bo Donovan sat in an interrogation room. His hands were cuffed behind his back. He was staring straight ahead, not at Sterling and Briggs, but through them. "This isn't right," Sloane said, plopping down on the floor beside the coffee table. A moment later, she popped back up, pacing. "It was supposed to happen on the 12th. It doesn't add up." She didn't say that she needed it to add up. She didn't say that she needed this one thing to make sense.
"Mr. Donovan, a witness puts you at the crime scene, crouched over the victim, writing on his wrist."
Briggs was playing bad cop. It wasn't so much in the words he said as in the way he said them. Like each part of that statement was a nail in Bo Donovan's coffin. A muscle in Bo's cheek twitched. "Fear," Michael said, "with a heaping side of anger, and underneath that—" Michael searched the lines of Bo's face. "Playing around the corners of the lips. Satisfaction." Satisfaction. That was more damning than either anger or fear. Innocent people weren't satisfied when they were arrested for attempted murder. Bo? Agent Sterling wasn't a natural fit for good cop, but based on what we knew of Bo, she must have suspected he'd be more likely, though still not likely, to trust a female. "If you don't talk to us, we can't help you." Bo slumped in his seat, as much as he could with both hands cuffed behind his back.
"You were found with this in the pocket of your sweatshirt."
Briggs threw down an evidence bag. Inside was a permanent marker, black. I registered the color, but didn't dwell on it.
"What do you think the chances are that forensics shows us your pen is a match for this?"
Briggs laid a photo beside the evidence bag. The head of security's wrist. Written on it was a 4-digit number. 9095, Sloane read. She walked forward until she was almost blocking the screen. "It's the wrong number. 7761. She punctuated each number by tapping the middle finger on her right hand against her thumb. "That's what's next. That number?" She gestured toward the screen. "Doesn't appear anywhere in the first 100 digits of the Fibonacci sequence." On screen, Agent Briggs wielded silence like a weapon. He was waiting for Bo to crack. "I don't have to say anything to you." Michael raised an eyebrow at Bo's tone, but this time, I didn't need a translation. Bravado. The kind born of being kicked too hard for too long. Agent Sterling walked around to Bo's side of the table. For a moment, I thought he might lunge at her. But instead, he stiffened as she moved to unlock his cuffs. "You don't have to say anything," she agreed. "But I think you want to. I think there's something you want us to know." Michael took in Bo's nonverbal response, then made a finger-gunning motion at the screen. "Point to the lady," he said. "You told us that Camille Holt was nice to you." Agent Sterling retreated back to her side of the table, never breaking eye contact with Bo. "Right now, it's looking an awful lot like you killed her."
"Even if I told you I didn't," Bo grunted, "you wouldn't believe me."
"Try me." For a moment, I actually thought he might. Instead, he settled back in his seat again.
"I don't feel much like talking," he said. "During our last interview, you told us you were with Tori Howard when Camille was murdered."
Agent Briggs leaned forward.
"But we've recently come to believe that Tori was with Aaron Shaw that night."
"Maybe I was trying to protect her," Bo spat,
From you assholes.
Or maybe, Briggs suggested, you were really trying to protect yourself. Tori and Aaron have been keeping things on the down low. She didn't want to give his name as her alibi. She must have thought she was pretty lucky when you volunteered yourself for that role. He leaned forward. She just didn't realize that when she allowed you to do so, she became your alibi for that night too. Smart, I thought. Looking at Beau on paper, it was easy to underestimate him. High school dropout, working a crappy job. He made no effort whatsoever to give the impression that he was anything more. But his success at the poker tournament told a very different story. He's used to being dismissed and ignored, but has a very high IQ, I thought. Tori lied to us. Briggs lowered his voice. Maybe we should be looking at charging her as an accessory.
Briggs,
Sterling said sharply. Good cop until the end. Agent Briggs leaned across the table, getting in Beau's face and going in for the kill. Tell me, Beau, has Tori ever taught you how to hypnotize someone? Chapter 37. Briggs and Sterling kept at it, but Beau didn't say a word. Eventually, they left him to stew and put in a call to us. Thoughts? Briggs asked on speaker.
it's not him.
Sloane was practically vibrating with intensity.
You have to see that. The numbers, wrong. The location, wrong. The timing?
Sloane turned her back on the phone.
It's all wrong.
Silence descended. Dean filled the void. He's got the potential for violence. The way Dean phrased that observation made me wonder if he saw any of himself in Beau. He's been living at the bottom of a hierarchy that favors those with money and power, and he has neither. Given the opportunity, he'd enjoy playing a game where he came out on top. Dean leaned on the counter, his head bowed. He's angry, and I'm guessing he spent a lot of his life being tossed aside like garbage. If the Majesty's head of security does die, Beau won't feel bad about it. Given the choice, he'd probably pick up that brick again. But, Sloane started to say. But, Dean said, Sloane's right. The numbers on the victim's wrists aren't just a part of this unsub's MO. They're a part of his signature. He needs to mark his victims, and I'm not convinced we're dealing with an unsub who, after 4 meticulously planned kills, gets caught writing numbers onto the wrist of the 5th before the man is even dead.
The wrong numbers,
Sloane put in emphatically. Sterling cleared her throat. I tend to agree with Sloane and Dean. Our unsub's MO has changed with each kill, and so has the method with which the victims were marked, until now. Eugene Lockhart had numbers written on his wrist in a permanent marker too, I realized. Say you'd killed someone. Leah instantly had the room's attention. Or, in Beau's case, say that you thought the person you'd hit with a brick was about to die. She leaned back on the heels of her hands, and my mind went back to 2 truths and a lie. I killed a man when I was 9. Maybe you had a choice. Maybe you didn't. And afterward, Leah continued, her voice light and airy. Say you didn't want to get caught. What do you do? Seconds ticked by in silence. Dean was the one who provided the answer. He knew Leah better than any of us. You lie. You lie, Leah repeated. You cover it up. And if you happened to know there was a serial killer out there, Leah shrugged. Maybe Beau heard about the numbers, I said, picking up where Leah had left off. Not what the pattern was exactly, just that there were numbers on all of the victims' wrists. Sterling picked up where I left off. He grabs that brick. He hits the victims.
panics, and to cover, he tries to make it look like the work of our unsub. Anger, fear, satisfaction. Everything Michael had said Bo had been feeling fit with this interpretation of events. Bo wasn't our unsub. He was mimicking our unsub. That means the pattern's not broken, Sloane whispered. The pattern isn't wrong. You are not broken, I translated. You are not wrong. Grand Ballroom, January 12th. Sloane held out first one finger, then another, like she was counting. The pattern says the next murder is going to happen in the Grand Ballroom on January 12th. 3 days. If Sloane was right about the Fibonacci dates, that wasn't our only problem. Speaking of the pattern, I told Sterling and Briggs, dread seeping back over my body. There's something else you should know. Chapter 38. Sloane hacked the FBI's files. Based on what she found, you think our unsub might have done this before. Agent Sterling let her summation of what I'd just said hang in the air for several seconds before she added, twice. It's just a theory, I replied, before either of the agents could decide that now was a good time to lecture Sloane on the virtues of not hacking the FBI. But the case Sloane found was never solved, and it fits the pattern. With respect to location as well? Briggs asked. I could practically hear him rubbing his temples. Was that killer working in a spiral? A Fibonacci spiral, Sloane corrected. And no, he wasn't. Numbers on the wrists? Sterling asked. No, Sloane said again. No numbers on the wrist. No spiral. If we were dealing with the same killer, then that killer had changed. That wasn't unheard of. But we typically saw changes in an unsub's MO, the necessary elements of a crime. Writing numbers on the victim's wrists wasn't necessary. Killing them in a spiral was a choice. A killer's MO might change, but typically the signature stayed the same. The numbers were always there. Sloane's voice was insistent. Even if he didn't write them on someone's wrist or kill in the right locations, they were there. In the dates, I finished silently. Maybe the signature, the deep-seated psychological need being manifested in the unsub's behavior, was that the kills needed to be driven by the numbers. Viewed from that perspective, the additional elements of the Vegas crimes weren't a departure in signature. They were an escalation. More numbers, more rules. I'm older now, Dean said, testing out the possibility. Wiser, better. I've waited for so long, planned so long. His voice was lower when he profiled, deeper. Once upon a time, I was an amateur. Now, I'm an artist. Invincible. Unstoppable. And this time, I said slowly, you want credit. That's why you wrote the numbers on your victim's wrists, I thought. You wanted us to crack the code. You wanted us to see the full extent of what you'd done. We'll have a hard enough time convincing the local PD that Bo Donovan isn't our serial killer without bringing up a decade-old case that, on the surface, looks completely unrelated. Briggs's voice broke into my thoughts. The powers that be in the city want this case solved. Now. If we push the theory that this last attack isn't the work of our unsub, we can expect the cooperation we've seen up to this point to dry up pretty quickly. Meaning, Leah said, that you might lose your complimentary suite at the Desert Rose. I hear there are some lovely establishments just off the strip. Meaning, Agent Briggs countered,
that if we want a list of hotel guests to compare to witnesses and persons of interest in the New York case, those same powers that be are probably going to refuse to hand anything over without a warrant. And, Agent Sterling added soberly, Grayson Shaw will almost certainly insist on opening back up the Grand Ballroom at the Majesty. My fingers curled themselves inward, my nails lightly scratching the surface of my palms. 3 days. That was how long we had until the next murder. That was how long we had to convince Sloane's father that reopening the ballroom was a mistake. What do you want us to do? Dean was nothing if not focused. For now, Agent Briggs said, we just need you to stay put. Stay in the room and stay out of trouble. We're on it. Whether or not Sterling and Briggs were on it, none of us had any intention of sitting around and twiddling our thumbs until they came up with our next assignment. I grabbed a pen and the Majesty notepad by the phone and wrote down the names of everyone we'd talked to so far on this case, then crossed off 2. The head of security and Camille Holt. He was in a coma. She was dead. Neither were suspects. The New York murders were committed 11 years ago, I said. By virtue of their ages, that rules out not just Bo Donovan, but also Aaron Shaw and Tori Howard. Children could be made to do horrible things. Dean was proof enough of that. But slitting someone's throat from behind? That wasn't the MO of a child with limited reach. I went through the rest of the names on my list. Thomas Wesley was 39, which put him at 27 and serving as the CEO of his first company at the time of the New York murders. The professor was 32, and a quick internet search informed me that he'd done his undergraduate degree at NYU. I hesitated slightly, then added a final name to the list. Grayson Shaw. Sloane's father was in his early 50s. He was clearly a man who thrived on power and being in control. The way he'd treated Sloane told me that he had tendencies toward seeing people as possessions and behaving callously and unemotionally toward them. I would have bet Michael's car that, as the owner of the Majesty Corporation, Grayson Shaw made frequent trips to New York. Far be it from me to suggest that Sloane hacked the FBI again, Michael said, preventing Sloane from dwelling on her father's name. But I think Sloane should hack the FBI again. Judd appeared in the doorway a moment later. He eyed Michael, eyed the rest of us, and then went to make himself some coffee. You missed out on a lot of action this morning, Leah called after him. He didn't so much as turn around. I don't miss out on much. In other words, Judd knew quite well what we'd spent our morning doing. He just hadn't interfered, and he wasn't going to interfere now. Judd's priority wasn't solving cases or making sure the FBI didn't get hacked. His job was keeping us safe and fed, no matter what. As far as he was concerned, most everything else came out in the wash. If tertium doesn't just mean that our killer has a fixation on the number 3, if it really does mean that this is the 3rd time our killer has pulled this routine, Leah was saying beside me, warming up to Michael's suggestion, it only makes sense to see if we can dig up the case we're missing. Only Leah could make hacking the FBI sound reasonable. I can set up a program, Sloane volunteered. Not just for the FBI, but for Interpol, local police databases, anything I already have a backdoor into. I'll have it search any available records that fit our parameters. Last time, I did a manual search for a single Fibonacci date. This will take a little more time up front, but the results will be more comprehensive. In the meantime, Judd came to stand at the edge of the kitchen. The rest of you miscreants can eat. Michael opened his mouth to object, but Judd quelled him with a look. Room service? Michael suggested smoothly.
Only if you want to rack up a $200 bill, Judd replied. Michael made his way over to the nearest phone. He'd been remarkably low-key since the fight at the pool, but I knew before he even started to place his order that he'd try his best to rack up a $300 breakfast bill. The only thing Judd vetoed was the champagne. While we waited for the food, I retreated to take a shower. I'd been going a million miles an hour since Sloan had explained the dates to me that morning. A shower would be good for me. Even better, it might quiet my mind enough that I could really think. When I'd first joined the program, we'd been restricted to cold cases, fed no more than the occasional scrap about whatever case our handlers were currently working. In the 3 months since the rules had changed, we'd worked a half dozen active cases. The first one we'd solved in less than 3 days, the second even faster than that. The third had taken almost a week, but this one? So many details. The longer the case dragged on, the more information my brain had to juggle. The unsub's profile evolved with each kill, and now that it looked like we might be dealing with a repeat offender, my brain had kicked into hyperdrive. The files I'd read, the interviews I'd watched, my own first impressions. I was learning that the hardest thing about being a profiler was figuring out what information to discard. Did it matter that Bo and Tori had both spent time in foster homes? What about the way Aaron both resented and bowed down to his father? The slightly clingy vibe I'd gotten from Thomas Wesley's assistant? The drink the professor had ordered, but only pretended to drink? Even now that our suspicions were targeted at suspects over the age of 30, I couldn't turn off the part of my brain that arranged and rearranged what I knew about everyone involved, continually looking for meaning. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something. Then again, being a profiler meant that I always felt like I was missing something, right up until the case was closed, until the killing stopped. And not just for a day or 2 days or 3, for good. The sound of the shower spray beating against the tub was rhythmic and soothing. I let it drown out my thoughts as I stepped into the shower and under the spray. Breathe in, breathe out. I turned, arching my neck and letting the water soak my hair and dribble down the front of my face. For a few blissful minutes, my mind was quiet, but it never stayed quiet for long. June 21st. That was where my brain went when I wasn't trying to force it to think about one thing or another. My mother's dressing room. Blood on my hands. Blood on the walls. Dance it off, Cassie. I could compartmentalize. I could distract myself. I could focus on the current case to the exclusion of everything else. But still, the memories and the fears and the sinking certainty about the skeleton in that dirt road grave were there, waiting for me, just below the surface. My dreams were proof enough of that. June 21st. I thought again. I remembered standing in front of the calendar Sloan had drawn, pressing my fingers to the date. No Fibonacci dates in June. And still, my mind cycled back. June 21st. Why was I thinking about this? Not about my mother. I didn't need my expertise in the human psyche to figure that one out. But about the date? I pictured myself standing in front of the calendar, going through it month by month. A handful in April, only 2 in May, none in June. A breath caught in my throat. My hand lashed out of its own accord, turning the shower off. I stepped out, barely remembering to wrap a towel around my torso on my way back into the bedroom. I walked over to the wall with the colored objects sitting, large to small, on the glass shelf. I looked past the sheets Sloan had put up for January, for February, for March, for April. 2 dates in May. May 5th, I said out loud, my entire body tensing. And May 8th. 6 years this May, Judd had told me.
But that wasn't all he'd told me. He'd told me the date on which Scarlett was murdered. May 8th. I didn't remember walking to the kitchen, but the next thing I knew, I was there, towel and all, dripping on the floor. Michael's gaze went to my face. Dean went very still. Even Leah seemed to sense that now wasn't the moment to make a comment about my state of undress. "Judd," I said.
"Everything okay there, Cassie?"
He was standing at the counter, doing a crossword. All I could think was that the answer had to be no. When I asked, Judd had to say no. "The unsub who killed Scarlett," I said. "Nightshade. How many people did he kill?" I realized, distantly, that the question I'd asked couldn't be answered with a yes or a no. Judd's expression wavered, just for an instant. I thought he would refuse to answer, but he didn't.
"As far as we know,"
he said, his voice hoarse,
"he killed 9.
Everything can be counted. Everything but true infinity has its end. Without the knife in hand, all you can do is lightly trace the pattern on the surface of your shirt. You can feel the cuts underneath. Feel the promise you etched into your own skin. Around, up and down, left and right. 7 + 2 is 9. 9 is the number, and 9 is what you were always meant to be.